Hello, everyone. My name is Amina. I would like to start this off by acknowledging that I am on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji Cree, Dene people, and the homeland of Métis Nation. So before we begin, I think it is important that I acknowledge that this is only a start to truth and reconciliation and being an ally. As the future of social work, we will leave a huge impact on this land and the people of this land. So it is our job to begin and continue our participation in being in line with those that own and originate from Turtle Island. So first, I would like to begin with discussing my background. I am a first-generation Canadian, meaning that my family immigrated to Canada from Kenya just before I was born in 1999. All I currently know is residing on Treaty 1 land. Before this course, I had a general understanding of land acknowledgement and what Treaty 1 meant. In all honesty, I thought Treaty 1 was the whole of Canada. That was the uneducated me. This class taught me otherwise. I can say that I've now learned a tremendous amount from this class alone, even though I have been in other Indigenous courses and was taught a bit about the Indigenous culture growing up in the Canadian school system. What was taught there was very vague, however. Learning about Indigenous history and culture was a week-long curriculum that barely touched on anything. It barely touched on what Indigenous culture truly stood for, as well as what Indigenous people endured and endure now and have been for years. This goes to show how land acknowledgement in itself is so important and how it is not taken as seriously as it should. And so during this course, I found myself relating to the content a lot, and I related it back to myself and my values, which helped me get a better understanding of the Indigenous culture and also helped me empathize. This was greatly done during the journals, and I really do appreciate those journals. They helped me reflect a lot. An example of this relation that I made a lot of the times was the importance of connectedness. I discuss this a lot, but to me and my culture, it is of great importance that we do not live individualistically in ways that we are taught to when we live in the Western society. And I know many people will say, Amina, you grew up here, so you are westernized, which I definitely do have a balance of the two. But my culture never fails to shine through because my mom, my home, and my community continues to be around me, and my culture has been taught to me since the day I was born. I know that this in itself is a privilege that I have because not everyone has the ability to freely practice their culture and learn it the way I do and have. Because settlers tried to commit cultural genocide on Indigenous peoples, they have to work harder to continue to pass their practices, values, and traditions onto the next generations. This does not help when the Canadian government does not incorporate Indigenous teachings and practices. How I help others understand this is if I were to go back home, the cultural practices are engraved in the society there. So you don't have to go extra miles to practice and learn because it's all easily accessible to you there. This should be the same case for Indigenous peoples. This is where they originate, this is their land, and so they should not have to be given the resources to practice their culture and learn their languages from others. Instead, it should be already accessible to them as it is theirs to claim. And so, back to connectedness, we are all here to feed off of one another and help each other in the way the society works now. In the way the society works now, everyone fends for themselves and refrains from building relationships. This removes the concept of community and aids in unhappy living. Another way I connect with Indigenous culture that I've been able to learn in this class was how they put importance on the land and nature. To the Indigenous peoples, their land is the mother. It is the center of everything. They treat their land with the utmost respect, and the same way one would respect their body is the same way Indigenous people take care of their land. In our own lands, we have our own natural resources that come from the land itself that we use to heal ourselves and create things to allow us as humans to flourish and prosper. This is why we should cherish Indigenous lands as much as we would our own. And one may view Indigenous culture to be a different point of view from what they believe in, which is understandable. And I found myself straying away from participating in Indigenous activities because I thought it would strain my relationship from my God, because it was participating in what others believe. But this is not the case. Indigenous values and practices is not just a belief system. but it's also a way of living. A lot of their beliefs and values are things that the average human can benefit from because it allows for a deeper thought process and awareness of what is around us, which can aid in our own healing. Teachings that I have learned in this class are some that I will use in my life forever moving forward. And so a big part of this class, which relates to land acknowledgement, is reconciliation and allyship. Before this course, I thought I knew what it meant, but I quickly came to realize that there was so much more for me to understand to be able to participate in reconciliation and allyship. My way of allyship was speaking out and raising awareness of the injustices that Indigenous peoples endure. And yes, that is all great, but there's so much more that needs to be done as a settler, whether you're a white settler or a non-white settler, as well as social work, as well as if you're a social worker. Being in this class made me realize I wasn't the true ally that I said I was. So, what have I learned in this class, and what will I do to change this? So, acknowledge the privilege that I have. That's the first thing that I will do. I would never have called myself a settler because when I think of settler, I think of colonization. In reality, this is not my land, and so even if it was unwilling to my people that we were brought here, we are still settlers in a place that we do not originate from. Another privilege, as mentioned, was having easy access to practicing my culture and religion. This was something that opened my mind when we had to travel distances to participate in the sweat lodge ceremony. For me, there are multiple locations in the city where I can worship with my own community. If I had to travel far distances, I wouldn't be able to on many occasions. These ceremonies should be a norm for us to see throughout the city and anywhere in Canada so that all of Indigenous communities can get in touch with their practices. Next, seeking information when my knowledge is limited and accept criticism. That's a big one. Although I consider myself an educated person, there's always more to learn, especially about different populations. No one knows best than the people themselves. When we stray away from asking questions, even if we think we are helping, we can do more of a disservice. Next is showing up. This was a big one that I didn't really think about before I started the class. Speaking up is a huge, but putting my words into action in many different ways are things that I've learned in this class. This can look like building relationships and continuing them. It is easy to forget about a cause when you're not directly affected by it, but this is harmful to the people that you showed up once for. The way I think about it is, if someone said to you, I'm here if you need anything, and when you need something, they're nowhere to be found, you'd feel hopeless and upset. Do not start something if you cannot continue to fulfill it, is what I took away from that. Next is fighting the systems that oppress. This is a huge one because the oppressed cannot thrive in a system that oppressed them to begin with. Challenging and changing the systems that discriminate as social workers is a huge part of being an ally. And lastly, which is a big one, is challenging your own biases, challenging my own biases. Challenge what you've been taught about Indigenous culture and people. As social workers, the basis of our job is to help those in need. That is true, yes, but don't forget to acknowledge strength as well, so you don't see people as their challenges. See their resilience. Understand the only reason why the negative statistics you're hearing about came to be because of the position that Indigenous people were put in, not because that's who they are. Colonization, at the end of the day, is the root of it all. And so that is just a few of the things that I can do as an ally and a social worker. This course overall taught me a lot about Indigenous culture, the oppression, and how to implement this knowledge into my everyday practice.